Only 6 Saturdays a year matter here, and this might be the most important one yet. With the national spotlight on us, it's time for Florida State to show the rest of the country what college football is supposed to look like.
Name. You say Florida State, the first image people get in Iowa or North Dakota is football. It just helps us grow as a name brand.
College football ties Florida's in our blood, definitely in our economy. Cash registers are ringing.
You're looking at probably $55, $60.
Players in college play and they show their heart. It's about how you love the game, how you're going to benefit your school. It's not about money, it's just for the love of the game, which makes it amazing.
We're here for a reason. Everybody can't do what we do. This for us. Everybody else at home, what we do? We out there grinding. Think about that stuff, man.
As an 8-year-old, I thought I was going to play professional football, and I don't know that I necessarily thought through the process. I wasn't advanced enough to realize that there was only one path, and I had to go play college football.
I had no options. I wanted to play in the NFL, and the NCAA is the best farm club for the NFL.
You have a choice always. Certainly there are professional football players and professional basketball players who have gone the professional route without the benefit of having gone to college.
Since 2006, the last year players could enter the NBA draft out of high school. Only 3 U.S.-born athletes in basketball and football combined have been drafted to the pros without playing in college.
The NCAA's got kids trapped. Football players, basketball players, you want the path to the pros, you've got to come and play for us and play for free. Thank you very much.
Over 1,200 universities and colleges have united as members of the National Collegiate Athletic Association. Together, they set the rules of the game for college sports. Living by those rules are the student athletes. For their talents, student athletes are given a free education and a chance to showcase their skills. In exchange, they must abide by a code of amateurism, prohibited from accepting any kind of payment or benefit beyond their scholarships. This amateur code is enforced by the NCAA National Office, a tax-exempt nonprofit organization tasked with interpreting and administering the rules set by the member schools. 450,000 student athletes play dozens of NCAA sports. Division I men's basketball and football hold a special distinction. Every year, they capture the national spotlight and generate billions of dollars.
Tells the ball. Jerem shot, Snaer. Good shot. Noles win. Noles win. Michael Snaer's Temple with no time.
I don't know. I just love football. I really got a passion for it. You know, it makes me happy. It really does. It keeps me at peace. It's my way of getting away from everything, man. I feel like being a football player, you're definitely in a fishbowl. I mean, everything that I would do or everything that I would say, people is going to notice, you know. I can't just do anything. I can't just go out partying and just drink and do things like that or even say certain things, you know, because everybody's always watching.
Baby. Sorry, 449, baby. Thank you, bro. Let's go, baby.
In his 4 years at UCLA, Jonathan Franklin has become one of the most celebrated players in the university's history. With over 4,400 yards. He is the Bruins' all-time rushing leader.
I'm from South Central Los Angeles. It's about 10, 15 minutes from UCLA. It's a rough place. You know, a lot of single-parent households, a lot of gangs and drugs going on, and police sirens every night in helicopters. Growing up was make money and take care of my mom. That was it. That's all. Nobody was talking about a degree, you know, coming out of here. Nobody was going to college. Nobody was talking about going to college. So many of my friends didn't make it or was shot, dead, went to jail. Something in me just said, be different. Football definitely made me focus and helped me get out the neighborhood. I started playing football in the 5th grade. I was about 10 years old in 1999. Went on to Dorsey High School, 2004. You know, I think I cried, you know, once they called me and told me they was going to offer me a scholarship, because I knew my mom couldn't afford to pay for college, and I didn't know how I was going to get to college. I got an opportunity to become something. It was like winning the lotto. I didn't have a clue how college was going to be when I got there. You know, I'm going to school to get my degree, but I'm also going to school to stay eligible to play this game of football. We college students, but we're really working, in my opinion. Take y'all through my day once again. Welcome to the grind right now. I mean, we're waking up at 5:30 in the morning, working out at 6 a.m. to about 9 o'clock. Headed to the weight room, about to get this work in. You know, with the boys right now. Just got done working out. About to go to class right now. And we have class from about 10 to 1 o'clock. Then meetings from 2 to 3:15. This is home right here. This is home right here. And practice from 4 to 6. And then we have tutor at night from about 7, 8, 9. And then it's homework. And we get done with that 10, 11. We're waking up doing the same thing. You know, that's every day. And if you don't perform, you get fired. You know, just like in the world world, you get in the boot. What we get in return, I guess, is get a scholarship, a dorm to live in, food to eat, and that's it.
We loved watching you this season.
Thank you so much. Being a dominant football program, you're bringing a lot of attention, you know, to your school and bringing mass revenue to the school. Any way they can to promote, you know, UCLA football, they do that, you know, by using us. If it's jerseys in the store, on schedules, we have magazines for the games. We're in commercials. They do whatever they can. Yeah, that was me right there. They never asked us, they just put us in here. I'm trying to see some cash for this, man.
Swing it out. Franklin looking. Touchdown blow.
So many people that come from nothing when we put so much in. They sacrifice so much that I feel that at times we do deserve extra money to buy stuff that we need, go grocery shopping, and sometimes we don't have enough to do that.
In 2012, UCLA basketball and football pulled in $71 million, a staggering sum that pays the bills for 19 other sports and rewards its administrators and coaches handsomely. Franklin's scholarship to UCLA is worth $28,000 a year. By the school's own calculation, though, it costs a student $31,500 to attend, a shortfall of $3,500 a year.
There was plenty of times where, you know, throughout the month, I didn't have enough for food. Our stadium had like 170,000 seats, 170,000 people buying the ticket to come watch us play. It's tough, like just knowing that, being aware of that. We had just won, and, you know, I had a good game, 100 yards, whatever. You go outside, and there's like hundreds of kids waiting for you in the tunnel. You're signing autographs, you're taking pictures. Then I walk back, and it's like reality sets in. Go to my dorm room, open my fridge, and there's nothing in the fridge. Hold up, man. What just happened? Why don't I have anything to show for what I just did? There was a point where we have no food, no money, and so I called my coach. And I said, Coach, we don't have no food, man. And like, we don't have no money, and I'm hungry. Either you give us some food, or like, I'm gonna go do something stupid. And he came down, he brought like 50 tacos for like 4 or 5 of us, which is an NCAA violation. But then the next day I walk up to the facility, I see my coach pull up in a brand new Lexus. Beautiful. There was a lot of guys on my team that sold drugs. Some of them sold drugs. That's why you hear a lot of guys selling their rings. Let's try to eat, man. It was total bullshit. But you don't say anything because if you say anything, you're stepping out of line. And that'll hurt your chances of getting to that next level. It's a brilliantly devised evil scheme to keep kids quiet.
Jeff Locke prepares to kick it away.
And they have full control of your eligibility, and that's really what matters.
Right out of the end zone.
And that's one of the reasons you don't see many people, many athletes out there talking against the NCAA, no matter how they really feel. There's a lot of talk in the locker rooms. Most guys feel the same way. They just feel that we didn't really get our fair share of what we helped bring in while we were at school.
College sports is big business. Every year, the universities playing them pull in over $12 billion. It's proven to be an incredibly stable industry with a rate of growth that outpaces blue-chip companies like McDonald's and Chevron. Yet out of all these schools in the NCAA, a small fraction of them are responsible for generating the lion's share of that revenue. Where do the riches come from? A combination of ticket sales, donations, television contracts, corporate sponsorship deals, and royalties from licensing and merchandise. Operating as untaxed nonprofits and with no shareholders, schools run up unbelievable expenses, spending every dollar they earn, and then some. In most states, the highest paid public employee is a college football or basketball coach. Nick Saban in Alabama leads the pack with a $5.6 million salary. And at the top schools, even athletic directors, assistant coaches, and administrators are getting paid big bucks. The pressure to win has led to a college sports arms race as schools renovate and re-renovate ever more lavish facilities to attract the nation's top talent. Governing the whole affair, the NCAA National Office generates a gigantic sum from its annual March Madness tournament. But the biggest profits to be had from college sports are in the hands of private companies. Licensors, apparel manufacturers, and television networks don't usually disclose their contracts, but estimates dwarf the rest of the industry combined. And at the center of it all, in return for fueling this enormous industry, the student athletes are promised something priceless: a free education.
Let's face it, everybody loves college sports everywhere in America.
College sports in the United States are huge and unique. The United States is the only country in the world at which big money sports are played at institutions of higher learning.
Clark Kerr of the University of California said, "This is what I've learned about college. The students want sex, the faculty want parking, the alumni want football."
A stadium on a campus on a Saturday afternoon feels different from a stadium at an NFL game. If my alma mater is doing well and I can wave my pom-poms and wear my university t-shirt, then I'm happy no matter what.
College sports are more fun to get into than any other sports. They give you a sense of time. It connects you to your university. It can connect you to your hometown. There's something about that is special.
There's a level of excitement that these are young men and women participating for their institution with their teammates as students, not because it's their job, they're amateurs at it.
The notion of amateurism is kids going to school, having their girlfriend, going to classes, playing football, and doing it for the love of the game.
Amateurism is supposed to mean that you play for the love of the game and not for money.
Many people think that amateurism goes back to the Greek Olympics, which is perfect nonsense. The Greek Olympians were professionals. They made money, they got draft deferments, they got women, they got real estate. They would have thought you were crazy to do all that hard work for a laurel wreath. Throughout history, the best athletes made money. And then in the 19th century in England, really all sports developed pretty much at the same time. Golf and tennis, soccer, rugby, cricket, all of that developed in England. And the ruling classes, aristocrats, wanted to keep the working man out. And so they developed this concept of amateurism to keep the laborers out of sports so that us rich guys, us title guys, can be the athletes.
Amateurism came from England into the very foundation of American college sports. In the Ivy Leagues, the students organized and ran their own games. There wasn't any money in it. So it got fixed that the students weren't doing this for money. It was just something they did on the side while they were students.
From the Ivy League, amateur sports spread across the country.
They're heading this way. That smashing bolt of Irish lightning.
And college football became a national obsession.
Knute Rockne, the miracle man of football. And how he proves it.
With packed stadiums and enthusiastic alumni, universities took control, and amateur sports began to bring in huge amounts of money.
Barron clinches it 32-13.
Amateurism is a noble ideal, but competition always tests it.
With no system to enforce the amateur rules, colleges would secretly recruit the best players, whether they were students or not, and often pay them under the table.
It's unethical. It isn't right for a college to buy football players. It isn't, eh? Well, I'll nip that in the bud. How about coming along and having a nip yourself?
As late as 1939, the underclassmen at the University of Pittsburgh football team went on strike because the upperclassmen on the team were getting paid more money.
Facing one pay-for-play scandal after the next, university presidents feared the corruption of amateurism doom college sports. An idea began to take root among presidents and athletic directors. Provide free tuition, room, and board, so there would be less incentive for the athletes to take money under the table. By 1956, these new athletic scholarships were sweeping the nation, and the basic contract of a free education in exchange for service on the field was born. Today, this agreement between the student athlete and the university continues largely unchanged. Every year, athletes must re-sign scholarship papers. They attest that they are amateurs and swear to obey the NCAA rules prohibiting payment.
The NCAA defines amateurism as whatever the NCAA wants amateurism to be. To me, if I decide to go play basketball with my friends and nobody's watching or paying to watch us, and they shouldn't, that's amateurism. If I'm playing in front of millions of people, and millions of people are paying money to see me, and I'm not allowed to make money, that's not amateurism. That's you taking advantage of me.
My nephew is the student body president of the University of Kentucky. As student body president, he's provided with a number of benefits that if he were an athlete would be considered violative of NCAA rules. He's paid $5,000 a year to be student body president, and he's on a scholarship. Now, if I were to say that Anthony Davis is being paid $5,000 a year, people would be up in arms over it. Nobody cares when the student body president does it. You have to ask yourself this: what does amateurism provide to the athlete? Is the athlete a better student, a better person, a better athlete by virtue of their amateurism? And I think the answer is no. No other person is told in their field of endeavor, you may not benefit beyond this expense. The star English student is not told, if you write a book, you will no longer be able to keep your scholarship. Doesn't that sound stupid?
A few years ago at the NCAA tournament, I interviewed Miles Brand, the president of the NCAA, about amateurism. And I said, why can't you pay the players? He said, because they're amateurs. Why are they amateurs? He said, well, because we don't pay them. There was nothing else for me to say at that point. You can't argue with somebody who says it's true because it's true, and that's the end of the story.
There's an absolute, complete consensus that we will never move to pay for play.
Soft guys don't play!
It's important to remember billions of dollars are being generated by the players. Coaches are making $5 and $4 million a pop. The reason they have fancy stadiums, the reason they have 10 assistant coaches, the reason they have all of this is because of the labor of the 19-year-old kids on the field.
I understand the criticism that they're generating all the revenue and they're not getting any of the money. And I think that is utterly false. It's because of the investments that we made. It's because of the attraction and passion that alumni have for their institution, I don't think it's because football players were playing football. What I see are hundreds of student athletes developing skills and talents, having experiences that they would not otherwise have, getting a degree, but we don't pay wages.
If there's no players, there's no March Madness, there's no brackets, there's no bowl games, there's no none of that. It's funny, I looked up the definition of indentured servant, and it's exactly what a student athlete is. You get food, you get accommodations, and you get training, but you don't get pay. That's exactly what it is.
Student athletes, because they should be motivated to be a student athlete by education and participation in sports, that they should be protected from the influences of commercialism and professionalism.
The statement that the student athlete was a benevolent institution had too many echoes for me of when the segregationists would say that segregation was a benevolent system.
Taylor Branch has been one of the NCAA's loudest critics.
We're pretending it's for their own good that we are denying them the right to earn a living.
Branch is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and one of the leading historians of the civil rights movement. He's been traveling the country trying to make the case that the problem with college sports isn't about money or education, it's about fundamental rights.
College athletes, they do not have the right of representation. They have no right of due process. And above all else, something that most people take for granted, livelihood. The right of a free citizen to seek compensation for services that are valuable. This is the annual convention of the National Association of Collegiate Athletic Directors. These are the people in charge of college sports.
I think all of these student athletes are getting a great, grand experience. And if they have needs that are unmet, that they ought to take out loans like the rest of us did.
As athletic directors, we care deeply about the student athletes. I never thought in my time as a former student athlete that I needed to be paid more than I was.
I don't doubt that people care about athletes, but if you care about somebody, deal first with their rights. Imagine this. Suppose the university were to say, we're going to have amateurism for all the students on our campus so we can be consistent. And that means that you can't get a job in the campus bookstore if you're an undergraduate, that you can't be paid as a teaching assistant if you're a graduate student. You're an amateur. You would think it's preposterous to deny these people their rights. And yet for one class of students, the athletes, we say, it's not up to you, it's up to us. If you are concerned with the athletes, deal with their rights. Everything else is an adjustment. Right now, we're not dealing with the rights, and therefore, from my point of view, no matter how much you care about the athletes, you're involved in a fraud, and it's going to come crashing down sooner or later.
Jack Lang from the Naval Academy. The student does not have consent. You can't have the animals running the zoo in a college education.
Okay, you said it, the animals in the zoo. I wouldn't put it that way.
Some people would argue that the NCAA has the best salary cap in sports.
We don't have salaries at all. And there's not even a salary to debate. They're not employees, they're students.
Well, every year at the NCAA tournament, they introduce the players as student athletes.
We're joined by University of Illinois student athletes. Okay, we have our student athletes. If you have a question, please raise your hand.
And we're all looking around the room saying, these guys are missing a month of classes, and you're calling them student athletes.
The phrase student athlete to talk about big-time college basketball and big-time college football is a misnomer.
There's no security in the education. Actually, I didn't realize until after my first year when I was signing my renewal paper and actually read the fine print. This was 1 year renewable every year, and the coach has full say in if you get it back or not. Even if you are a 4.0 student and not getting it done on the field, they can still terminate you at any time.
It's just like signing a contract when you go and work for somebody for a living. There's certain expectations, and if you don't live up to that expectation, then the contract will not be renewed.
College athletes are told when and where to be. They're provided with the tools of the trade. They're traveled around in order to make money. Everything about a college athlete strikes me as an employee.
A student athlete is a term that was invented by a man named Walter Byers, who made the NCAA the power that it would become. And he was worried because several states were agitating to classify football players as state employees because they made money for state universities.
In the 1950s, some college athletes or their heirs were filing lawsuits if they were injured or were even killed on a football field. People were filing for death benefits, workman's compensation and everything, saying this is a scholarship athlete. He's basically working in your football program. We want you to pay benefits.
Byers recognized the threat posed to college athletics, and years later, he described the NCAA's legal response.
The colleges are scared to death at the prospect of having their athletes identified as employees and therefore subject to workman's comp. I had our law firm do a major research on this issue. Our law firm, they rely on the old amateur rule to say, look, these are students first and athletes second. These are student athletes. They are working at their professional training as a student and therefore are not subject to workman's comp.
Walter Byers was saying, I invented the term student athlete to give the NCAA leverage to reap benefits from the performance of these athletes without having to have any balancing obligation to those athletes.
Walter Byers' student-athlete strategy would be put to the test in the case of Kent Waltrip. Kent was a running back from East Texas who accepted an athletic scholarship to play football at Texas Christian University in 1972.
When the coaches came to the house and were visiting with us, they said, now, Miss Waltrip, do not worry. You're going to get him back in better shape than you're sending him to us. And I said, I'm going to hold you to that.
In 1974, TCU traveled to Alabama to play the Crimson Tide.
It was a perfect fall afternoon. The stadium was at capacity, which I think back then meant 60 or 70,000 people. It was about 5 minutes left in the first half, and the quarterback turns and pitches the ball to me. I accelerated as I hit the corner. The cornerback was coming up to hit me, and so we collided with our shoulder pads, and I see the turf coming toward me. All of a sudden, I'm seeing a bunch of faces over me, and they're all saying, "Don't move." And I want to say, "Hey, don't you see that's the problem?" In the ambulance, I was told, "Kent, you have a broken neck and you're paralyzed. And you're going to be paralyzed the rest of your life."
Several months after the injury, TCU informed Kent that they were not liable for any of his medical costs. As Kent struggled through rehabilitation with the dream of one day completing his degree, TCU cut his scholarship. Kent sued the university to be classified as an employee and receive workers' compensation. He claimed he was recruited to play football. His scholarship agreement was a contract for work, and coaches controlled his schedule and his pay. Exactly the kind of claims that Walter Byers had prepared for. The case dragged on for years in the Texas courts, and in 1997, Walter Byers was deposed by Kent's legal team.
Did there come a time when the phrase student athlete came into existence in the NCAA rules and regulations?
Yes, there was a deliberate decision so that if workman compensation claims were being filed, the colleges would have a far better position to take than if they did not use this terminology and this recommended language. That's what this was about.
In court, TCU used the student-athlete defense, arguing that Kent was a student first and had sustained his injuries participating in an extracurricular activity. And therefore, TCU was not responsible for his injuries.
When that question of student athlete came up in court, I almost started laughing because, you know, it wasn't the chairman of the business school that came to my high school and took me to lunch. It was only football coaches.
Ultimately, the court ruled in favor of TCU, and Kent received no compensation for his injury.
TCU was able to walk away from responsibility for Kent Waltrip because of this student-athlete myth.
The student-athlete strategy that Walter Byers invented has been, sadly, it's been brilliant.
In the 40s, the NCAA consisted of a few file cabinets, a few pieces of letterhead, and one part-time employee, Walter Byers. The NCAA was just a paper tiger, a largely impotent union of colleges across the country. It existed to run a few national championships and to provide the most minimum of rules.
Byers had a vision for the NCAA's future as a centralized organization that could bring order to the chaos of college sports. In 1951, he would get the chance to put his plan into action.
Scandal rocks the basketball world. Young men caught in this web of gambling intrigue presented a tragic scene.
The
University of Kentucky, several of its players were arrested in a broad scandal for fixing games.
The college sports world was becoming a den of corruption.
I don't know how you can pick up a fast 500. 500? Maybe miss a basket now and then.
And so Walter Byers puts forth the NCAA as a solution to the crisis of gambling and corruption.
Byers convinced the schools to unite behind the NCAA and cancel their games against Kentucky.
It was a bold stroke that essentially established the NCAA's power as an enforcer of the association's rules.
For the first time, breaking the rules would come at a cost, and college sports now had a judge, jury, and executioner.
The signals are broadcast as radio impulses into space.
Later that year, Byers would use these same strong-arm tactics to steal control of the next sea change in college sports: television.
Walter Byers helped colleges believe a colossal falsehood that this little TV screen is a mortal threat because the people who now come and pay tickets to watch your games on Saturday will stay home and watch it on this little box for free.
Byers' solution was to regulate television broadcasts and sell a single TV package through the NCAA.
The University of Notre Dame enters the arena for the 68th football season of the Fighting Irish.
But perennial powerhouses Penn and Notre Dame already had their own national TV deals in place.
There was this rampant fear that if those two programs are allowed to televise their games nationally every week, what about the rest of us? People are going to stay home and watch Notre Dame and Penn. Well, they're not going to come and watch the rest of us.
Again, Byers united the member schools behind the NCAA, and they threatened to cancel their games against Penn and Notre Dame unless they voided their TV contracts.
What happened in 1951 was Walter Byers was essentially saying to Penn and to Notre Dame and to any others that might want to televise their games that we have the power to keep you from televising your own property.
With no choice, Penn and Notre Dame gave in, and Byers negotiated the first NCAA TV deal worth $1.14 million. The NCAA would take $80,000 as their commission.
The NCAA actually took that money and built a headquarters for the first time. So television literally helped build the NCAA. Walter Byers was a very cold, calculating, aloof individual.
And the NCAA became really a reflection of his management style. They feared him. They didn't like him very much, but they knew that they were going to have to bend to his will because he was the guy who controlled college football.
Byers had endowed the NCAA with control over the universities and a monopoly on television, establishing its role as the overseer of college sports for years to come.
Push it back. Ready. Stop pouting. It may work on your girlfriend, it's not gonna work on me.
Most people are unaccustomed to hearing the honest truth.
Come on, let's push it back.
But the biggest strength of our program is being blunt with the kids.
By the 1980s, there were many ways beyond television and ticket sales to exploit the commercial potential of college athletes. And there was no one better at it than Sonny Vaccaro.
I've been coming to the Final Four steadily since 1979, when Magic and Larry game in Utah.
It is Indiana State against Michigan State, and the fans here are going bananas.
1979 was the start of the commercial revolution because the shoe companies were starting to get involved, and Nike was. That's why I was there.
National champions, 1979.
In those days, if you were a college team, 80 to 90% of all the schools bought their product from Converse. Converse owned everything. So back in 1977, I approached Phil Knight and Nike. I said, you guys want to get into basketball? I'll get you in. Now, I knew all the college coaches. Why? Because of the Dapper Dan.
The Dapper Dan Roundball Classic was the first high school basketball all-star game, featuring the top talent from across the country. It was the most important recruiting stop for college basketball coaches, looking for their future superstars. And it was all started by Sonny in 1965. Over the years, Sonny had befriended scores of top coaches. He knew that the way to the players' feet was through their coaches' pockets. So Sonny made his pitch to Phil Knight and Nike. Pay college coaches to put their players in Nike shoes.
And Phil Knight and Nike said, can we do it? And I said, yeah, why not? It's not illegal. And he gave me permission to pay the coaches.
For the next few years, Sonny traveled across the United States, cutting checks to college coaches, paying them $5,000 to $10,000 to put Nike shoes on their players.
But I went from 9 or 10 schools to 60 or 70 schools in the next year. And in 1985, we had all 4 Nike teams in the Final Four.
All 4 teams in the finals wear Nike shoes, a fact that was trumpeted in national ads this week.
Let's understand, every shoe company was paying their coaches then, and the numbers were getting higher. The pays were much bigger than $5,000 and $10,000.
Georgetown coach John Thompson is paid nearly $100,000 a year to put the Hoyas in Nike shoes.
Only 4 short years later, Sonny and Nike signed the first all-school deal with the University of Miami that put every athlete in every sport at the university in Nike apparel. And in return, Nike wrote the university a check for $1 million.
I knew this was it. This was bigger than just paying the coaches. We were paying the university. The president had a sign. I knew what I had. We had the bookstore. The bookstore, ladies and gentlemen. If you have the bookstore inside of these universities and they only sell your equipment, the fans that go to the football game, all those hundreds of thousands, they go through the bookstore and they walk away with what? University of Miami jersey, and they have a swoosh on them. You're selling your product and no one else can get in. You own Tiffany's. It's your diamond. I knew that day we had the bookstore. Nike, they were able to market and buy their way in to the most open market ever created, amateur sports, the NCAA. We just did it. And I watched this grow and grow and grow, and the one thing that was constant, the kids never got anything.
Nike opened the door for private companies to flood college sports, from sponsored bowl games to the exclusive NCAA tournament ladder. The commercial revolution that Sonny started shows no signs of slowing down.
People get confused. They see an extreme level of what appears to be all of the trappings of professional sport, and they come to the conclusion that it can't possibly be amateur sports anymore. Well, it certainly can be. The first and foremost principle is that those who participate are students.
We value deeply the tie between athletics and the classroom and believe that athletics and academics can lead to the best educational experience that a young man or a young woman can possibly have.
98.5% of men's basketball and football athletes will not go pro. That means a college education presents the chance to prepare for a career outside of sports.
I understand the argument for compensating college athletes, but I think that argument is predicated on a woeful premise, which is that really the education doesn't matter that much. But if in fact the institution has any integrity and they're demanding that even a superstar player has to at least meet a minimum academic standard, then you are being offered something of tremendous value, something that many families scrape and save a lifetime to provide for their children.
We're providing an opportunity for a lot of young people that wouldn't have that opportunity. How do you put a price tag on that? How do you put a price tag on education? Ultimately, everybody's here to win. But if we bring young people in here and we don't do anything for them to get an education and we use that profit, then that's almost criminal.
When I played college football at the University of Maryland, we kind of had a motto that C's get degrees.
That's what we do.
Everyone pretends, but you know that your responsibility is to win football games.
You sign a contract that says you're here to play football, but be a student first. But football interferes with being a student first.
You can't convince me that anyone thinks it's a good way to prepare you for a day of learning is to work you until you throw out at 5:30 in the morning. Yeah, now I'm gonna go sit in this class bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and take notes. I knew it was more valuable to my school that I get a C on an exam and an interception on Saturday than it was that I get straight A's and get no interceptions on Saturday. That doesn't bring in boosters, that doesn't bring in fans to fill the stadium.
Money and winning are the two driving forces, not education, as Mark Emmert has promised.
Gerald Gurney created the first academic support program for college athletes at Iowa State, a practice that has been embraced by athletic departments across the country.
One of the first things I noticed back in 1980 was that 90% of my football and basketball student athletes were having a great deal of difficulty in writing and reading. There was an athlete who was highly recruited out of the south side of Chicago at Iowa State. I noticed that he couldn't write his name. And he also wanted to major in engineering because he thought that that was about running choo-choo trains. While this is a very sad story, it comes down to the original sin of college athletics, admitting through special admissions woefully ill-prepared athletes, and then watching the somersaults we all do to keep these athletes eligible and retained at school. Above all costs, the university invests hundreds of thousands of dollars for each elite athlete to get them to campus. The notion of not admitting them or not getting them eligible, oh my God, that is not a possibility here. If you get a degree, that's all good. But your challenge is to get them eligible. It's not about educating them. That went by the wayside. What happened in North Carolina happens all the time. It's all over the place.
Saturday, now that new allegations of potential academic fraud have surfaced.
The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill is one of the best public universities in the country. With 5 national championships, is home to one of the most storied basketball programs.
2009 national champion.
Not content, the Tar Heels eyed the riches of the elite BCS football schools and wanted a piece for themselves. But their football program had been mired in mediocrity for nearly a decade.
This is the beginning of a great new era for Carolina athletics. Coach Davis, welcome to Carolina.
In 2006, UNC lured Butch Davis away from the NFL to rebuild its football program.
I truly believe with the commitment by the administration that this is going to be some kind of special place.
The university announced a massive $70 million remodeling of Kenan Memorial Stadium, adding 15,000 seats, multiple levels of luxury suites, and a state-of-the-art academic support center for athletes. In 2003, Mary Willingham began working as a learning specialist with student athletes at UNC.
At the time, the academic support unit had a meeting with Mr. Bador, the athletic director. I asked him directly at that meeting in front of the entire staff if the administration realized that admitting top football players in the country, that our graduation rate would suffer. And he said, yes, we are aware of what this decision is going to bring to Carolina.
In his first season, Butch Davis was able to recruit some of the best players in the country to UNC.
4 offensive linemen, 5 defensive linemen, 2 wide receivers, a running back.
With Davis's first recruiting class, Mary noticed a drastic drop in the academic abilities of the incoming athletes.
From that point on, for me, it became a super challenge because there were so many students that needed help, and I just felt like I was drowning. I can think of 3 particular students. We had to go back and work on letters and sounds.
By his 3rd season, Davis had built a top 25 football team. But Mary began to notice that more and more athletes were coming to her for help with papers, for independent studies classes.
So I went around and I asked some of the advisors what the deal was with these independent studies and how it worked, and they told me not to worry about it, that they would help with regards to eligibility, and that they just really had to do a little bit of work and it wasn't that big of a deal. It said independent study on the course title, but we just called them paper classes.
Mary discovered that students in these paper classes were never required to attend class or meet with a professor. All they had to do was submit a paper at the end of the semester.
Those paper classes were always, 100% of the time, graded A or B. I didn't really want to have anything to do with it because no learning was taking place. I was devastated.
Mary exposed the paper classes to Dan Kane, a local reporter.
I mean, it's a heck of a way to basically provide, a route to eligibility for athletes without anybody really figuring it out.
Dan began investigating the depth of the academic fraud at UNC. He discovered over 50 of these paper classes going back at least a decade, all in the African Studies department. The enrollment was predominantly athletes.
And what's really interesting is the Carolina basketball team that won the national championship in 2005, that team alone had 15 paper class enrollments that year. In the summer of 2009, the basketball team changed academic counselors, and that new counselor comes in and says, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I want to do things right. And from there on out, the basketball team is out of these classes. Football enrollments stayed, yes, I think they stayed pretty much at their prior levels.
It was the culture of the entire university for the last 2 decades that this is how we keep athletes eligible. And no, we don't take them in and teach them to read and write first. That's impossible.
Prompted by the pressure from Dan's stories and fearing NCAA sanctions, UNC launched a series of investigations.
We found no evidence that the counselors or the students or the coaches had anything to do with perpetrating this abuse of the AFAM curriculum or any other.
The investigations found no wrongdoing on behalf of the athletic department or administration. It placed the blame solely on one professor, Julius Nangoro, chair of the African Studies Department. UNC administrators presented their case to the NCAA, who judged that no rules were broken. UNC has received no penalties for the decades-long academic fraud. Dan Kane has since revealed that the paper classes went back as far as 1994 and has published emails where academic advisors asked Professor Nangoro to schedule paper classes and offer him football tickets, memorabilia, and other gifts.
You know, if the NCAA doesn't want to look at this, you'd argue that they've just sent a message to every college that's serious about sports across the country to do this exact same thing.
They all knew, and they all know, and that is a real shame. And I am really sad about that. Because it's the adults that are failing the students.
With more money than ever flowing into college sports, the NCAA and its member schools wage a daily struggle to uphold their amateur code and academic integrity.
The NCAA rules by intimidation and fear. It's the totality of control. It's the way athletes have to be monitored every minute of the day or night because they could be tripped up and do something that's against NCAA rules.
With over 400 pages of rules, athletes frequently violate them without even realizing it. When they do, it falls to each campus's compliance department to investigate and report any violation to the NCAA and enforce the prescribed punishment. This quasi-legal system holds thousands of athletes' eligibility in the balance.
A mass murderer has more rights in the legal system than a football player has in the NCAA system.
Devin Ramsey was recruited to play football at UNC by Coach Butch Davis in 2007.
I like Coach Davis. I like their staff. They told me we're going to start something new. We're going to start our own dynasty. And it'll be like we started. We were the ones. We were the building blocks.
Unlike many of Davis's recruits, Devin graduated from an academically elite prep school in New Jersey, from the Lawrenceville School.
Being at boarding school was intense. It felt like we were doing like college work. And then when I got into UNC, it wasn't a huge jump for me as like some of my teammates. For some of my teammates, it was more about just remaining eligible. But for me, I really wanted to get into the business school. And I was very confident about what I was going to do at UNC.
Devin is just straight business, zero drama. There were a lot of guys you had to worry about. Devin wasn't one of them.
One of my moments of glory is LSU in the Georgia Dome. Caught a screen, broke a tackle, and then just dove into the end zone.
Devin Ramsey, a junior from Red Bank, New Jersey.
Despite a 40 to 50-hour work week playing college football, Devin avoided the paper classes that were relied upon by his teammates.
They said your freshman year, it's going to be tough, but you're going to have academic counselors that will help you try and adjust to college life. When I was a freshman, I was taking a sociology class. I had a paper one night, and I emailed it to one of the tutors at UNC. I asked her if she could check the grammar, and then she sent it back, changed the punctuation, and added 5 sentences to it. And then I went to a practice. Then two years later,
we were in the middle of a walkthrough, and Coach Davis walked up to me and whispered in my ear, said, "We might lose Devin." I can remember thinking to myself, they got to have this wrong. I mean, not Devin.
It was a Thursday. They called me up and they're like, "Hey, Devin, good to see you after practice. It's like you're going to have to interview with head compliance guy." And I was just like, what is going on right now?
Have you used tutors and mentors provided by the Academic Support Center?
Freshman year, I think I worked with Jen like once or twice.
Jennifer Wiley. We identified a couple of emails that were exchanged between you and Jennifer back in 2008. Do you believe that any of the assistance that Jennifer provided to you was impermissible?
No. You trying to set me up or something?
No.
The university had done, I would say, a surprise and
interrogation, a taped interrogation of Devin, asking questions about this paper. Having taught courses at the university and law school level involving writing, I would have said that the draft Devin submitted to this tutor and the revisions and corrections that were returned to him were inconsequential. But nobody actually had the paper that was turned in.
The teacher didn't have it. It wasn't submitted online. Like, I didn't have it. You know, I don't keep like 3-page papers from 2 years ago. It didn't make any sense to me. I was waiting for the NCAA to go. This whole situation is silly, like, compared to like the other players on my team. So I figured that, you know, they would rule favorably for me soon.
A day later, the head of compliance for UNC sends an email to some staffer up in Indianapolis with the NCAA. Says, I need to know, is this a violation of the academic fraud provision? Within less than a day, with no hearing, no sort of fundamental sense of process that as lawyers you expect, and a total lack of evidence, the bureaucrat in Indianapolis says, oh yeah, that's a violation of academic fraud. Well, at that point, Devin Ramsey had been tried and convicted of academic fraud and unethical conduct. That was it.
The NCAA ruled that I was guilty of academic fraud and I was ruled permanently ineligible. And that just crushed me. It was terrible. Not only was my name brought through the dirt, but that I'd never be able to play again was just...
Devin brought his case to the University of North Carolina's Honor Court, which handles allegations of plagiarism and cheating on campus.
The Honor Court for North Carolina, which is the body at the university that's supposed to rule on such things, found the amount of quote-unquote illegal tutoring. It's so insignificant that they just said, we're not going to, forget it. We're not going to deal with it. And yet some bureaucrat in Indianapolis reads these emails and says, oh no, he's guilty of academic fraud. And his career is over.
It almost feels like I was set up. You know what I mean? I feel like just like manipulating. I feel like a lot of us college athletes have been manipulated.
It's an issue that will always be out there. He's inextricably linked to the UNC scandal, and yet he was probably the single biggest victim in the process of anybody out there.
Higher education offers this opportunity for student athletes to play football, to play basketball for the university. We offer to pay your tuition and pay your fees, and that's the deal. If you don't like the deal, then go do something else. It's just that simple. In its simplest form, the question is it permissible to run a sports league that consists only of people who don't get paid for playing? And the answer, I think, has to be yes.
The crucial fact about the NCAA is that it is, in fact, what economists call a cartel.
A cartel is a group of separate business entities that come together and coordinate their actions. They all say, well, what are we killing ourselves here competing? Why don't we just agree not to compete, and we'll all be better off?
Think about oil. There once was a time when the oil-producing countries had almost no pricing power. And countries like the United States that imported lots of oil could get it for practically nothing. So then you had the oil embargo, and you had these countries openly turn themselves into a cartel called OPEC, because it gave them control of the pricing. It didn't matter what the market wanted. This is what they said the price was going to be. Now, the way college sports has done that is a little reverse. They have banded together, instead of to set a high price, they banded together to set a low price on their labor pool.
The NCAA gets all of the schools and conferences together. I mean, they go to conventions. They vote on agreements not to compete and agree they will not pay players more than so much, which is the scholarship.
And that is price fixing. In most industries, not only is it a violation of the antitrust laws, but it's also a criminal violation. Every single college and university in the country has an incentive to get that 5-star player from high school who is the best prospect in the country to play for their school.
Universities can make millions of dollars off of this guy. Coaches at various schools can make a ton of money off of this guy. Administrators can make a lot of money off of this guy. How are you going to get all of them to follow your rules and not pay?
So there's this constant pressure for universities to subvert and go on the black market under the table to compensate athletes.
If people want to give somebody money, those other people are going to want to take it. That's just reality.
Honestly, I don't know if this will throw us into an NCAA investigation, but in my senior year, I was getting money on the side. I really didn't have any money. I had to either pay the rent or buy some food. I remember the feeling of like, man, be careful. There's nothing wrong with it. And you're not gonna convince me that there is something wrong with it.
That's not a scandal, except we create it to be a scandal. The way the NCAA cartel structure is set up, many things are talked about as if they're illegal when they're not.
Suppose you had a really talented math student and he did not have a lot of money, and he wanted to get paid a lot of money for his math skills and then turn around and give that money to his father for his church. There would be beautiful stories written about what a great kid this is.
Self-entitlement, pay-for-play allegations involving his father.
When that supposedly happened with Cam Newton and the skill was football instead of math, everyone went crazy and said this is a horrible scandal.
The fact that it's normal to look at the television and hear negative comments about a kid is just backwards to me.
Terrell Pryor, he's a selfish kid, man. That's the way it is.
The NCAA has the power to say that you're unethical and essentially to shame you in public for failing amateur standards that they imposed unilaterally on you.
The best players in college sports, in an open market, those players would be worth millions of dollars to whatever universities would want to employ them. So the NCAA, by defining cheating the way they have, has created a system where you're guaranteed to have a lot of cheating, according to the NCAA.
Schools make millions upon millions on the backs of 18-year-old kids. And then you have the audacity to sanction them because those are the rules. But what are the rules? Like, we made the rules up. This isn't a question of morality. This is a question of however many, like 6, 7 or whatever old white guys made up a rule saying athletes can't get paid. Not because they're amateurs, it's because you don't want to pay them. That's it.
The man who created the college sports cartel stood at its helm for 37 years. In 1988, Walter Byers stepped down. A few years later, he gave a speech at one of his last public appearances.
You look at the young people here, and I suppose sports is a fountain of youth, because each generation of young persons come along, and all they ask is, Coach, give me a chance, I can do it. And they go on and surpass the marks of their predecessors. And the excitement continues. And it's a disservice to these young people that the management of intercollegiate athletics stays in place, committed to an outmoded code of amateurism drawn, quite frankly, in 1956. And they can count the house, and they can multiply the ticket prices, and they can read the TV contracts. And it doesn't take any great genius to understand that what was real in 1956 can hardly be remembered in the gross commercial climate of intercollegiate athletics today. And I attribute that to the neo-plantation mentality that exists on the campuses of our country and in the conference offices and in the NCAA. That the rewards belong to the overseers and the supervisors. The coach owns the athlete's feet, the college owns the athlete's body, and what trickles down after that can go to the athletes. All of this is not fair, and I predict that the amateur code now, based on a foregone philosophy and held in place for sheer economic purposes, will not long stand the test of the law.
Bayer's prediction has yet to come true. With deep pockets and an army of lawyers, the NCAA has won or settled every legal challenge to its amateur code. The rewards Bayer spoke of have grown into unimaginable wealth. Yet the NCAA has doubled down on its commitment to amateurism.
Are we going to take the collegiate model, maximize our values, or are we going to wave the white flag, throw in the towel, and say, look, it's too much?
However, a class action lawsuit currently making its way through the courts may force the NCAA to pay college athletes.
The Ed O'Bannon case is going to be heard, I think, this week. I do believe it could have a lasting impact that could be helpful to the student athletes of tomorrow. I do.
Judgment day perhaps awaits for the NCAA. Might amateur athletes have to be paid?
And it comes from an unlikely source.
The people I represent and people I've represented have made billions and billions of dollars off the industry. I was part of that darn thing. I'm still part of it.
Still part of it.
But it's wrong.
Even while Sonny Vaccaro was working for Nike, helping transform college sports into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, he was speaking out against the injustices of amateurism.
You keep selling them and selling them and selling them, and they've gotten nothing, nothing, and nothing.
I've always spoken out against the NCAA and what they've done, but I always worked for a corporate entity that benefited by it, and I was paid by these people, and I was paid well. So the public and other people could say, well, Vaccaro is speaking on both sides of his mouth. I never had a platform to be heard until my wife and I agreed that we were going to quit working and walked away from employment 5 years ago to speak to college students. Unless the people who make the rules come to their senses, it's not equal playing field. There's no recourse for the student, quote, athlete. Everybody has a right except the player.
While speaking at college campuses across the country in 2009, Sonny got a call from Michael Hausfeld, one of the world's leading class action lawyers.
Nobody in life should have the value of their labor taken literally for nothing by someone else.
I showed them my volumes of books and information on why I thought this was a winnable case.
Hausfeld wanted to take a case against the NCAA, but he needed someone to represent the athletes.
What I basically did was talk to a lot of kids that I knew that went through college sports. Ed O'Bannon was the first one to put his hand up to do it.
This was an opportunity for me to step up and change how the NC2A does business.
In 1995, Ed O'Bannon led the UCLA Bruins to a national championship and was named Player of the Year. The NCAA still sells DVDs of the game and included the 95 Bruins in their NCAA basketball video game franchise.
A friend of mine put the video game in and showed it to us. And there I was, a tall black guy, left-handed, number 31. Everything about that player on the video game looked like me. My friend says to me, you know, the crazy thing about this video game is I paid for it and you didn't get a penny. How can my likeness continue to be sold well after my playing days without my permission? As a society, as a law, that is wrong.
Since they filed suit in 2010, the O'Bannon case has grown into a broader question than the rights of retired athletes in video games. At stake is whether current athletes should be paid when they appear in every football and basketball game broadcast on TV.
If a judge rules that they get a shot or have potential to get a shot of the TV revenue, you're right. It is a absolute game changer. Absolutely.
It's a much broader case than just selling your name or selling your jersey. We have the power here in this case to level the playing field right now. Give these kids their rights. Why is it we're fighting this? Play the games, charge admission, do whatever you want. Just give these kids their due.
Sports economists have spent years developing models on how to pay college athletes. Some advocate sharing money equally with everyone on the roster. Others prefer a salary cap like in the pros. Or you could let athletes make money off of endorsements, but not compensate them directly.
The more I thought about this system, I say, basically you need to begin with who should be at the table to address these questions. That until you deal with the basic rights of who sits at the table, you're wasting your time. The Olympics are a wonderful precedent. Astonishingly, nobody seems to be aware of how directly it applies to the situation with college athletes.
In the late 19th century, at the same time amateurism made its way into college sports, the Olympics were revived based on the same amateur principles.
The Olympics were far more pure and insistent on amateurism standards for 80 years than college sports. They considered college sports corrupt because they allowed scholarships. Whereas Olympic athletes, the Olympics, goodness gracious, they didn't allow anything.
After nearly 85 years of amateurism binding Olympic athletes, the U.S. Congress passed into law the Amateur Sports Act of 1978. This law created a governing body for each Olympic sport and required that 20% of that body be made up of current athletes.
Once those 20% athletes are sitting at the table and they're saying, do you know what we go through to train every 4 years for an Olympics, and you're telling us we have to be on food stamps? People couldn't look them in the eye, and amateur standards dissolved in the Olympics. In fact, the word amateur has been expunged internationally from the Olympic charters.
Within a decade, virtually every sports governing body voted to abandon amateurism. Athletes were free to seek commercial endorsements and make money off their talents.
You have the dream team, you have pros in the Olympics. Michael Phelps is a multimillionaire, but the Olympics still have the emotional pull that people falsely attributed to amateurism.
It all sounds so very noble that a kid is getting a scholarship, and it's wonderful, and it's school spirit, and you do teamwork. We all buy that crap about sports, and some of it is true. There's a certain ugliness to it, and we don't like to see ugly things, and so we cover our eyes and don't pay attention.
Sadly, much of the fan base for the major teams doesn't really care if these kids are legitimate students. All they care about is if Old State U is 10-1. What sense does that make? That's a perversion of what college sports is supposed to be about. And money is at the bottom of it, and it's corrupted the whole enterprise.
The NCAA is making money off of the backs of students who are being told in a contract that they're going to play their sport and get an education. But the contract is false. When they leave school, they may have a degree, but they are not getting an education.
It's not right. It wasn't right when I played and when it was just hundreds of millions being made. And now it's billions upon billions. And there's no reason the players should be cut out of this completely.
I really believe 30 or 40 years from now, we're going to look back on this the way we look back on prohibition and think, what were we thinking? There was no way that was going to work.
We'd be much better off as a society, just get rid of the hypocrisy, pay the players, and be done with it.
I am a firm believer that an employee should get paid for his work. And 100% I see student athletes as employees. Hiding from it is just cowardly.
It would be extraordinarily difficult for me to justify why the University of Nebraska-Lincoln would wrap within its boundaries a professional football team.
If you were going to pay student athletes, would you get rid of the grant and aid?
What do you do with women's soccer? What do you do with men's soccer?
Who would get paid?
Wouldn't there be an advantage for the Alabamas more so than even now?
You have to pay everyone. You can't just say it's for certain sports.
And what is the moment to say, now you got to pay your student athletes?
But you know what? We got no idea how to do it, and it's not going to happen because we can't do it.
When somebody mentions providing more to the players, they throw up their hands and say, it's too complicated, we can't do it. We can't pay them because competitive balance. Where would we get the money? What about Title IX? Will we have to pay the wrestling team the same as the football team? Will we have to do this? Will we have to do that? It's just too complicated. When complex international business transactions are conducted by these schools every single day, if their attitude was the same to other business opportunities, they wouldn't be able to hire an assistant in their office. They wouldn't be able to hire coaching staff. It's too complicated. That's not a good enough reason to deny compensation to players.
You have to address the rights of the athletes, give them a place at the table, and say, all right, how are we going to run this to make it fair? If you do that first, then the questions of can we be fair to the other sports? Can we be fair to the athletes? Can we still be true to the academic mission? You can address all those questions from a sound basis.
The current system is ruinous for education, and it's exploitative and paternal toward the athletes. People want to blame it all on the coaches. They want to blame it all on the administrators, on the networks. But we all have a share in the dishonesty in this system. And that's what blinds us to the basic issue, which is the question of the athletes' rights. All you have to do is give athletes a voice at the table. That's where change really begins. That's where honesty begins. And it's where the solution really begins.
your whole life to make your first album. Guess I've been busy living, so that first outcome was worth hearing. So here go, let me kick a verse into song out. From the time I was conceived, I honestly believed I was destined for something I couldn't break from. It'd be cliche to say greatness, but hey, this is what I learned. With you, why you can't escape from. So embrace it, don't run away from being that digit in that everyday equation. The steady glitching, itching for limits to breaking up and can get in your way if what you deliver is great. There we are, back to greatness. I think I discovered what my place is. In third in space is. It's me doing me, overtime, other rhymes. It's a butterfly effect that affect mankind. Y'all ready to rock now? Y'all ready to rock now? Y'all ready to rock now? Y'all ready to rock Took a little bit of time, had to get my mind right, had to get the lines right. Looking at my future like it's only been my hindsight. I ain't playing that ball, would have been a crime. Set it on my bed thinking I was on the sideline. That's why I shut thinking about that bread. I believe that ball would have been a crown, so I took it to the sleep, then I dreamed instead. Looking at the sound, then I took it to the streets. Took it from the books, then I took it to the beats. Looking at my grind like a stretch, long time from the date that I signed to the date of my release. Damn, don't find said the least, but I want to be the prime representative of a beast. I ain't trying to line with the rest, try to shine with the best of the line, just focus on me, as it should. If I can, then I could be the case. So I ran over tracks like I could beat the race, overlapping. Who was laughing at the start? They depart, call it perm. I know it burns that I'm relaxing in your face. Listen, I am on my job. I set them standards and them rates. Live and learn how to discern the need to chill and making haste. Now it's time for everybody